Hello, my fellow seekers. Welcome to Into the Work, therapy for empaths, seekers, and the intuitively driven, where you have front row seats to therapy sessions and expert interviews that will help you define the important work that you're here to do. So I guess you actually have something better than front row seats. You practically have a seat on my couch. That's right, you will have unrestricted access to actual sessions with real people, exploring real life issues. You will continue to be inspired by powerful conversations with experts and healers that might just share exactly what it is that you need to hear to get unstuck. I am Michelle Pauverman. I am a recovering people pleaser and former anxiety-driven empath, turned now mostly grounded psychotherapist and intuitive coach. I have been helping people for almost 20 years manage their limiting beliefs and anxiety to finally stop the self-sabotage and step into their gifts. I created this podcast, Into the Work, to give you a place to learn more about yourself and give you actionable strategies to finally move those roadblocks holding you back so you can go for what you want. Above all else, my hope is that this podcast is a catalyst for your awakening. If you're listening, you've already taken a step towards getting off of autopilot, and our next steps together will be taken episode by episode, waking you up to the possibilities, the new ways of thinking and being, so that you can stretch into that next level of your story. The spark has already been lit, and my friend, this is a journey from spark to brilliance. So together, let's light a fire. Hello and welcome back to the show. Today I'm asking you to try to do something for yourself that could just change your life. And while it's a catchy title, there is a lot of really juicy truth here for you to listen in to start making some big changes within you. So today I'm asking you to stop gaslighting yourself. I'm mentioning 5 different ways you can pay attention and things you can stop saying to yourself or stop doing to yourself to break up with your inner bully. Most all of us have an inner bully, right? And most all of us have heard that term, gaslighting. We typically hear it. I see it on social media. It's kind of become a real common term used, in particular when talking about narcissism. Just in case you don't understand what gaslighting is a harmful, emotionally abusive way to manipulate somebody, basically. It tends to include denying facts. So we'll say the abuser, right? The abuser denies what happened. Let's say they make promises. They deny those promises were ever made. They have their own reality that is separate from the reality that is shared. And they control the narrative. So basically what that means is you're wrong a lot and they're right all the time, right? Belittling is something that comes up a lot when it comes to gaslighting, where the quote-unquote abuser humiliates or belittles the person, making them feel like they're unimportant, their feelings are unimportant, perhaps maybe in a relationship with somebody who's gaslighting you, you express that, hey, earlier my feelings were really hurt when you did A, B, C, or D. And they say to you, how dare you, right? They say, how dare you? I just spent all this money on dinner for you. I just took you out. I canceled my things. And now you're going to complain, right? It's something like that. That's just an example of how an abuser can take somebody's feelings and belittle them, right? Withholding is also something we see when it comes to gaslighting. The abuser, quote unquote, the person, the partner, withholds affection, attention, love, stays in the place of either criticism when challenged or the silent treatment. That's the withholding. It's withholding of love and attention and affection, basically to punish. And blaming is something else you're looking at when it comes to gaslighting. You're always shifting the blame onto the victim. There's no responsibility. But I'm guessing that when we think about gaslighting ourselves, you could probably see where I'm going with this, okay? Because I can't tell you how many beautiful souls I get to know who spend significant amounts of time up in their head gaslighting themselves. I can't tell you how many people are striving for their goals. I mean, some of them are still finding ways to be successful, but they do keep self-sabotaging. They're only getting so far because of the gaslighting. So today, I am calling your inner bully to the hot seat for some serious questioning. Just like a victim of emotional abuse in a relationship with a narcissist, you need to get out of that kind of relationship with yourself. You need to consider yourself as someone you are in charge of, somebody that's under your care. I know it seems kind of strange because we're talking about yourself, but if you can wrap your brain around it, that you are in charge of it, you are the only one who can show up inside there, right? You are your own parent, caregiver, therapist, loved one, child, however you look at it. And none of those people should sit by and watch what's happening within you and stay quiet. It's time to show up and break up with your inner gaslighter. So, I want to instill some hope here. This can happen. You may feel like, yeah, this is how the only way I know to be, Michelle, so there's really no way that it's ever going to change. I feel pretty hopeless in how I can self-sabotage up of my head. It really keeps me from doing A, B, C, D. But I'm telling you, this can happen. You can change this. You can show up for it. You can start really shifting your whole vibration around it, where you're constantly seeking for higher level feelings and thoughts and things to support you. It just starts with the very first step, which is acknowledging you have a problem, right? And to start to strive toward your own, being your own inner advocate, right? So first, let's look at maybe a couple of reasons why your inner world has potentially become so unruly. So first, I think it's kind of needs to be said, like, where is the accountability? What are the consequences, right? If you talk to a friend the way that you talk to yourself, you would eventually probably be out of a friendship. Truthfully, it may feel like the Wild West inside of your mind, right? Inside that mind of yours. We just don't have the same consequences and accountability that we would have with other relationships. However, and this is a really big point right here that none of us are really thinking about when we're bullying ourselves, badgering ourselves, criticizing ourselves. The relationship you have with yourself is the foundation for everything else in your life. It sets the tone for all the relationships you will have. Most often, we find our external worlds are really just a mirror of what's going on internally. So if you don't like what's going on around you, a lot of us will say, hey, we got to look what's going on inside you, because we're always our choices, what we tolerate, what we create in the environment around us is a mirror to what's going on inside us. So we can see how important this relationship is. It's the most crucial relationship you're going to have in your life is with yourself. But here is another reason you may or may not have thought about as to why your inner critic is such a bully. And the deal here is that to start, we had to understand the baseline that we're all striving to be loved. We are striving to feel safe and to belong. It's built into our survival mechanisms here as a human being that we are safer being connected, loved, and belonging. And so we have an inner drive for that. So while we wouldn't start bullying and criticizing our friends at risk of losing them, and perhaps you've done that and you've lost them, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but we're more likely to filter ourselves. We're more likely to never talk to our friends the way that we talk to ourselves. So that inner voice of yours, while it is mean and seemingly unsupportive, I bet you that if we were sitting together and we mapped it out, I could help you see exactly why it's trying to help you, how it's trying to help you, why and how. Because it is likely trying to protect you and keep you in line so that you are not abandoned, so that you remain safe and loved by others, and that you belong. So on some level, this is like our shadow parts, right? The things that go on that are really dark and negative inside us, a lot of times we can tie the string to what they're trying to teach us, what they're trying to do. They're trying to take over and keep us safe. And it's our job to create a strong sense of self that says to that thought, those things that come up that badger you, right? Those negative thoughts. It's our strong sense of self that can stand up and say, oh no, I don't need you, right? I don't need you to badger me in order to get the thing done. I don't need you to insult me so that I'll do better, right? And so it's up to us to actually stand up to it, stand in our power, and shift the narrative. And teach ourselves in our internal world, our brain, and teach our psyche that there's another way to do this, that I can be successful through love. I can be successful in other ways. So we know that this inner gaslighting, it's not working. And here's why, too. There are consequences. The erosion of your self-esteem is a really big deal. Like, it leads you to feel, it's like a cycle, right? That erosion of your self-esteem leads you to feel more self-doubt, invalidation. Your personal power and your self-worth only plummets over time, leaving you spiraling even more in that cycle of abuse, because then you're frozen, you're stuck, right? And it leads you to feel stuck and isolating from others, and then afraid to go out and fulfill your purpose. And then, you bully yourself because you're not doing the things that you think you should be doing. And so it's really important for you to recognize that what you're doing has significant consequences on your well-being, but also on the life that you're creating and how you create and what you create and getting what you want out of life, right? So how do you know if you're gaslighting yourself? Here's a couple things to think about. Do you invalidate your feelings? And do you excuse others' bad behavior? I think those of us that have an inner gaslighter tend to excuse other people's bad behavior, and we'll get more into that. And you second guess your decisions. And maybe not always, but you do it a lot. You're constantly second guessing yourself. You'll notice that when I'm talking throughout today, you recognize that strong inner critic within yourself, and you probably blame yourself for a lot. You take the blame when maybe you shouldn't. So in the world of psychology, we might call this inner bullying, this inner gaslighter, a maladaptive behavior. So maladaptive behaviors are often intended to help relieve or avoid stress. They're things that we do that are trying to help us relieve or avoid stress, but they actually contribute to increased distress, discomfort, and anxiety over time. So again, despite the good intentions, quote unquote, right, the good intentions of your inner gaslighter, it's obvious, we know it's only making you more unwell. It's not working. It's a bad plan. It's never going to work. It's never going to get you where you really want to go. So it's time to do some of the following. Number one, I want you to just start paying attention and noticing, because that is our first step. First step is awareness. Now you can say to me, oh, I'm plenty aware, Michelle. But reality is you might just think you're aware, but you really may not actually realize how much you're doing it. Quick story here. I'm really literally putting this podcast together to talk to you today about. Right now, as recording this, it is just after Halloween. And during the break, I went ahead and grabbed some peanut M&Ms. And I don't really eat candy like that. It's really not good for me. It's not a rule or anything. It's really just not good for me. I have health issues that I am ahead in the game. I'm doing awesome. And eating sugar like that is a sabotage of my health. I'm going to feel terrible for the rest of the day. I'm going to have brain fog after, and it contributes to stomach issues that I have. So I know how bad it is for me. But I was craving sugar. I'm craving stimulation. I'm craving caffeine. I'm craving things to keep me going, right? And so I went and grabbed the M&Ms and I ate them. And guess what I did? I grabbed another one of those little mini bags and ate another bag. And then when I was done, I had the sugar high and I was like, oh, that, okay, getting back to work. And then I was standing in the kitchen and I said, what is wrong with you, to myself? Like, what the F is wrong with you? You know that's going to make you sick. I'm so mad at you. I cannot believe you just did that. And I berated myself for like a good solid couple minutes. And then I stopped. And I mean, I was really mad that I did that because I could already start to feel crappy. I already started to feel the problems I was going to start to have. And I realized, oh my God, I'm sitting here writing this podcast to you. And I'm so aware and enlightened, right, that I sat in my kitchen and just berated myself for eating those. And so I had to take a moment and really acknowledge what I was doing. And I was like, yep, I practice what I preach. I took a moment, I created space, and I reworded what was happening, and then forgive myself, let it go, let go of all the attachments to that sugar that I have, even though they're, negative attachments. It's going to be just fine, and I just need to move on. But just an example of, we think we've got it under control, or maybe we know we don't have it under control, but do we really know how often we're doing it, right? So, yes. So, I'm going to ask you to stop belittling yourself. And there are lots of ways that we belittle ourselves, right? So, I'm going to start by acknowledging when you say things to yourself like, I'm just being too sensitive. You're too sensitive. There are consequences to a statement like that. Dismissing your emotions reinforces the belief that your feelings aren't valid or worthy of your attention. It's super belittling. It erodes self-trust that can, at the very least, it can lead you to feeling like chronically stressed. It's most likely that you feel that you're being too sensitive when you're feeling unseen, unheard, or invalidated in some sort of relationship. If you're saying to yourself, I'm just too sensitive, there is a need that you have that is rising up and it is being dismissed. You are belittling it. And what it deserves is for you to want to know more about it. And for you to know that you deserve more and to go after getting more, right? So I'm just too sensitive. Another one is you're being too needy, right? No, you're not being too needy. You actually just have needs. They're not being met. And so many, particularly us women, really struggle with having needs. Not only women, men too. There are those of you that also struggle with this, but it's such a predominant thing for women. And just messaging that we've gotten our whole lives around having needs, what that means, other people are more important than us. And so this is such a big one. And by the way, you're not asking for too much. Whatever it is, when you're feeling like you're asking for something, I'm going to tell you that most likely you're not asking for too much, right? So you're not being too sensitive, you're not being too needy, and you're not asking for too much. You're likely asking for love, care, or respect, which are important expectations, and it is okay for you to have them. If you're someone that says, I'm just being too fill in the blank, it's possible that you heard this growing up. Perhaps the adults in your life invalidated feelings when you were younger. Perhaps told you were too much, maybe blamed you for having the feelings and the needs. Maybe you were mad at your parent or somebody, and they, in return, told you that it was your fault. And so you got dismissed a lot. And so this stuff can start to stir up. And there's lots of reasons. It's not just the parent's fault, right? Like you could have had friends in high school that were like such influencing, characters in your life. And they told you you're being too needy. They told you you're being too much, right? There's ways we receive this from people when it was never about us. It was about them, right? This is their stuff. We're figuring that out, the boundary. And so it's really important to recognize that, it's not you. And so I just want to plug here too, like when I really learned about this, I was a counselor. I was a therapist over at WPI. I was a college counseling center. And I remember when it really started to hit me, every young woman that came into my office, almost like weekly, I was dealing with these women who felt like they were too needy. And it did happen mostly in, more intimate relationships. And it was like a song that I heard every week. It was unbelievable to me. And I remember looking at one of them in the eye because I had been fed up. I had had enough of listening to this message. And I just said, you are not too needy. You just need to learn how to have needs, and other people need to get in line and figure that out, right? They need to be there to meet those needs, or they're not your people. But we need to hear that message. And every young woman who I told to them that you are not too needy, it was such a relief because they really believed that they were. There really wasn't another option. They really believed they were. And so I really want you to hear that. And instead, I want you to validate your feelings. I want you to practice saying my feelings are real and they deserve to be acknowledged, right? I want you to reflect on your sensitivity. What is it trying to tell you? It's often a sign of being a really deep, caring person, not a flaw. And us empaths, we tend to be very sensitive. So yes, you might be sensitive in some ways, but that does not mean that they're not valid, right? You're just picking up on more. So number 2 that I want you to think about is I really want you to consider how you can stop potentially blaming yourself for a lot. Now, it doesn't mean that externally you blame yourself for everything, although that is definitely a high possibility. If you're constantly blaming yourself, that you own that up and you say, hey, no, it's my fault often, because it, gets rid of the conflict, it eases the pain of the situation. But gaslighting yourself does often involve self-blame. And you perhaps tell yourself that, if, when you think back to things, growing up, or you think back to parts of your life, you might wish, well, if I had been more self-sufficient, my parents would have loved me more, right? Or if I had been thinner or a better athlete, I would have had more friends. If I was less of a bother in my life, I would have more friends. I'm just not likable. We get down to our beliefs. But basically, you kind of believe that everything is your fault, regardless of any negative choices others make. You kind of feel like, even though everybody's making bad choices here, or they're making choices that I don't like, you can somehow tie it back to, but it's probably me. And here's the important message in this. If you blame yourself often enough, then you're also likely making a lot of excuses for other people, right? And this brings us to number 3, and that is to stop invalidating your feelings by making excuses for other people. Now, I'm going to share with you, this is my own struggle. Like, I can be very quick to forgive. I've also written people off pretty quickly too. If you treat me really bad and it hurts me in my core, I'm done. But I also am quick to forgive. And because I see all sides of people. While others see someone as good or bad, right or wrong, I have the gift of seeing everyone's humanity. It's not black and white for me. And I suspect that for many empaths and sensitive people in the world, that you feel similarly, that you can relate to this. So as a therapist, for instance, I practice this because I see that good people do bad things every day. being human is so complicated. And I'm just going to kind of hold this space for this little bit here because, you know, in your life, you're going to be hurt and you're going to be disappointed by others. And even more importantly, you may be disappointed in yourself for doing something that is not aligned with your true moral code. You may even be really angry and disappointed with yourself. But here is what I know. Doing bad things does not make you evil. It doesn't. People are complicated and messy. People cheat in their relationships for many different reasons. They lie when they're scared, and they make bad choices that can negatively impact a lot of other people, just because they felt something overwhelming before they did it. So I guess on one hand, this is my permission to you. If you were holding on to something that you did that is not in line with your true moral code, I want you to forgive yourself. You are honestly in good company. Of course, I do need to say there are people that don't really have a moral code. And for us sensitive type people, us empaths, that can make us shudder. Like we can't even fathom that, right? That feels horrible to come in contact with what does feel evil. There are people who have no remorse for hurting, no remorse for stealing, manipulating for power. They just don't care. They don't have any empathy at all. So when the heat gets turned up on them and people are calling them out, they just move on to the next situation where it's easier to just repeat their performance. Those people do exist. And that's not you, right? That's not you. So while typically making bad choices and behaving badly does not make other people evil, it is also up to you to hold a boundary and communicate that boundary, right? Expressing what is okay with you and what is not okay with you is your job. And then obviously acting in accordance to that boundary. And so one more thing I want to say about this as we are kind of talking about how we can be making excuses for other people, I want to say this. You are not going to lose a relationship that is healthy and meant to be and good for you just because you set a boundary and communicate your needs. If it does, then it was not a relationship for you to stay in. The cost of your self-esteem and integrity is far too high. So getting back to your relationship with yourself, you are going to show up. This is the goal. You're going to show up, stop blaming yourself, and start noticing if you're making a lot of excuses for other people, right? Because that's a way that we avoid conflict. It's a way we avoid setting boundaries. And the better you get at setting boundaries, the better you get at expressing yourself, the stronger you are with your relationship you have with yourself and the world. So just start by showing up and being curious in the moment when you notice you're doing it. Be the best parent to yourself you can be. When you notice that you're either blaming yourself or any of the things we talk about here today, right? Invalidating your feelings or belittling yourself in some way, I want you to say to yourself, I love you anyway. I'm so sorry that you feel it's easier to blame yourself and it's so scary to hold others accountable. I love you anyway. I will always cheer you on and I want the best for you. I love you and I accept where you're at. And I know that we're capable of more. I know you have all that you need to set a boundary. I have all that I need to feel powerful. I have all that I need to create the life that I want, to create the relationships that I want. So what do you need in this situation to feel better is a good question because you aren't thinking about that when you're doing all the above. When you're doing all the gaslighting, you're not thinking, what do I need in this situation to feel better? And number two, how can I communicate this need in this situation? How could I do that? Those are important questions for you to ask to start communicating and placing that blame externally, right? Now, not everybody's responsible for our emotions, but we are responsible for letting people know what works for us and doesn't work for us. So number four, this last one, is to stop second-guessing your decisions. And while that is way easier for me to say than it is for you to do, It is the worst to go over and over and over decisions in our head when every decision feels unsafe and imperfect. And if you were raised by parents who constantly pointed out your flaws or mistakes, or were in other relationships that did this, other intimate relationships, or just really good friends that just constantly did that to you growing up, or whatever, you might often feel frightened of making decisions on your own. We tend to internalize their voices and pick up where they left off. And this can really lead us, and just this inability to express ourselves, make a decision, and stick with it, and have a connection to our knowing instead of gaslighting ourselves and constantly telling ourselves that what we've decided is not good enough, we're not good enough. This can lead to staying in jobs, relationships, and situations where other people might have left already, right? When you know that it's not right, but you don't know how to make a decision around it because you gaslight yourself and you cannot feel confident in moving forward, And also, if you need constant reassurance, that is a symptom that something isn't right? There's something wrong with your compass. Like if you're needing constant reassurance, that needs your attention. And it is time for you to meet this part of yourself with compassion and kindness, not gaslighting, not criticism, not what the F is wrong with you. That is not what that part needs. That's a real sensitive, tender part, and it needs you to ground yourself. Imagine if you were reading this message, grounding yourself would be in all caps, right? I most often see this kind of anxiety in people who spend a lot of time ruminating up in their heads. It can feel impossible to make a decision with all of the energy swirling in our heads, and it's just that level of anxiety. And we build anxiety through gaslighting. So when we are constantly negating ourselves, then we start to build up even more anxiety. So I'm going to ask you in this situation, when it comes to, really constantly second guessing yourself, I'm going to ask you to step away for a moment. I'm going to ask you to ground and calm the body and just ask a simple question. Your brain wants to go to what if? We're not allowed what if questions when we're feeling anxious like that, because we can't decipher between what's anxiety and what's actual factual thought. So I want you to just ground, calm, and ask a simple question. And that is something like, what feels really good? A or B? What feels really good? What feels easy? What feels like kind of more no than yes, right? Sometimes we got to go that way. We can also do the ask and receive, is option A better for me? Yes or no? And see if you receive a quick flooding of feeling and thought or emotion, like, yes, it is, right? Or is option B, right? And you can sit and ask yourself. Now, if you feel like the more you think about a decision you have to make, the farther away you get from the answer, then how you attempt to think about it, right? How you're thinking about things might be getting in the way, causing you to feel indecisive and to make quick decisions you would get later. So after all, that analysis paralysis can be exhausting. And sometimes we just pick something to feel better from that exhaustion, right? That analysis paralysis. So if this speaks to you at all, I do want to mention that I have a free video guide that is called How to Use Emotional Intuition to Make Big Decisions. I'll put it in the show notes. It's free. It's just a quick video for you to watch to kind of help walk you through something you could try. So wrapping up, I just want to say, obviously, if you're, have this gaslighting going on, you're having a strong inner critic, it's going to be difficult for you to move forward when your self-talk is full of negative or pessimistic criticism about how you think, feel, all of it, what you do. When adults grow up in families that were riddled with criticism and disdain towards trying new things, if there was a lot of fear and criticism around dreaming or thinking outside the box, it teaches children to be conformist, to avoid being called out, right? This limits growth because taking risks is too scary. So that is just like an example of how something we kind of were around all our lives, right? So maybe there's some messaging you got, and maybe that's what's behind some of this really strong inner critic you have about particular things. It's just important for you to bring some awareness. You don't need to know why in order to heal it. You don't. It can be helpful for you to kind of understand where some of it might be coming from, where you learned it. It just kind of helps you separate it, be less enmeshed from it. You can recognize it as a separate thing from you, this inner critic, this inner bully, and that learning that it's conditioning can help you to separate from it, look at it when it's happening and say, oh, no, I choose not to do that. One more point I want to make is if you tend to doubt your memories or your perception of what happens in your life, it's not uncommon that if you are somebody who maybe you're a survivor of childhood abuse or you just had a lot of gaslighting in your life and you didn't know it. When you had something scary or hard or traumatic happen to you, and if other family members insisted what happened to you wasn't a big deal, even when the abuse included something bad or something emotionally unsettling, right? It was like bad, and you're told it's you, get over it. When everyone close to you tells you something's not a big deal and it's time to get over it, you begin believing it and feeling bad about yourself for being too sensitive. So also acknowledge that if you have, big T, little t traumas, if you have things in your life, and especially if you can identify that there was somebody in your life who gaslit you a lot, the good news is you don't have to continue living like this. You can free yourself from gaslighting and self-sabotage. But I want you to acknowledge that I love you anyway type of conversation with yourself, and it's okay to be where you're at with it. It's very confusing, and it's going to take some time for you to build those muscles of self-worth and self-belief, and that part of you that is strong and can very much attach to knowing what's right, wrong, and knowing what reality is and what reality isn't. Sometimes when you've been through a situation like that, it's helpful for you to actually write things down that happen that challenge you. So let's say you're in a partnership now where somebody's doing something and you're questioning your perception of it. If you notice this in your relationship, write things down as they're happening. Make a note on your phone like, oh, person just said this. I have a feeling I'm going to have a hard time with that, right? Person just did this. And just write it down so that you can look back at your report and say, no, that happened. I wrote it down, so I know it happened. It's just a way to start to create a connection. So a couple other things for the rest of us and all of us to kind of look at to get rid of some of this gaslighting is, spend a day writing down all your criticisms. Like today, of the day of this recording, I would have to sit down and it's easier to do it on our phones than it is piece of paper, but I would have to write down that I said, what the F is wrong with you? And my whole rant, right? I would write those things down. It is your job for just one day to just keep a note. And every time you notice you say something negative, bullying, when you gaslight yourself and all the things we talked about, right? All the things we talked about. From second guessing your decisions to invalidating your feelings, making excuses for other people, blaming yourself, and of course, anything you're doing to belittle yourself. If you could just write it down for one day, it's really helpful to be like, oh, I didn't think I was so bad, but hey, I have 50 things here at the end of the day. Maybe you have 10, but still, those 10 things, like, wow, I want you just to notice how you felt in your body after you said them. So when you make a note and you write it down, just quickly pull out your phone, quickly write it down in your note section, and then take a note, like, that made me feel. Like, just notice, how did you feel in your body? because I want you to kind of get attuned to your physical reaction to what you're creating there. And then another thing, is the obvious. I'm just going to say it again. It's just to reframe those self-defeating thoughts with positive affirmations. Like, for example, one of your negative scripts might be like, I am a failure at relationships. I suck, right? I'm a failure at relationships. And then I want you to stop, recognize that you just said that, and change the script to, I'm a really good listener and I help people feel cared for, right? I'm a really good listener. I'm a really good friend because I help people feel cared for. And so you're just flipping the script. And I want you to remember, you can't change your first thought, but you can change your next one. That's where the power is. We cannot change what flies through our brain. And some crazy stuff is going to fly through your brain. And you're going to be like, I can't believe I just had that thought. That's so messed up. But we have no control over that. That's just like chemicals coming together with psyche and energy and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you can't control that. But what you can control is your second thought and how you respond to that. Sometimes it's hard when you physiologically feel the shame dump or like an anxiety bomb goes off in your body, and we can't identify saying something specifically to ourselves that caused it. We just feel this overwhelming feeling in the body. In these situations, we just get triggered by the situation itself. Whatever's happening in the environment triggers us, and maybe we don't have very clear thoughts about it. We just have this, like I said, a shame dump or something that comes up. So I do want to say, even in these situations, it's important to identify the feeling, see how it is trying to protect you, and reassure yourself with a positive reframe of your strengths and bring yourself back into feeling safe. The last tip that I want to put in here is for you to ground yourself. Since reality can feel all over the place, right? Because life can feel that way and we don't have control of other people. The only thing that we really can do is we can take care of ourselves. We can ground our nervous system. We can try to stay in the present as much as possible. You can't change the past, but we are in control of the present. So again, that first thought, and then the second, we can do something different with. Now, I have a few resources for you in my Inspiration Hub. That's where many of my free giveaways go to live on and inspire. I'll put the link in the show notes, and you can log in or sign up for it. And in the Inspiration Hub, there's meditations, there's checklists, there's a few things, but there are breathing techniques and things that you can do to calm the nervous system and all sorts of neat stuff. So check out the Inspiration Hub. I'll put it in the show notes. Thank you for listening today. I hope this allowed you to become more open and aware of how you might be negatively sabotaging yourself with your inner gaslighter. Remember, the goal of this work is to learn how to become your best friend, how to become the advocate that you can be for yourself. I'm telling you, folks, radical love and acceptance never hurt anyone, right? So have a beautiful day. I'll talk to you next week. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Into the Work Therapy for Empaths and Seekers. Don't forget to grab your free gift, your Shadow Work Transformation Bundle at michellepoverman.com. I've included everything you need to get started to break through the patterns of self-sabotage and finally start to heal the parts of yourself that are getting in the way of truly reaching your potential. From a powerful meditation designed to help you meet and embrace your shadow self, to the guide that's full of curated prompts and important questions to support you on this journey. This really can be the work for you to unmask the root cause of all the issues you've been experiencing, honestly, and start to feel free to believe in yourself and go for what you want. The link for this free bundle is in the show notes. And if you like this episode, I would be so grateful if you could take a moment and rate, click and follow, and leave a review. Of course, you can always follow me on socials at Michelle Poverman. And keep in mind, as you embark on your journey from spark to brilliance, remember, the universe is always conspiring in favor of your awakening. Everything that's happening is in support of you lighting your own fire within. So until we meet again, may your path be well lit and your heart be guided. Shine bright, seekers. Until next time.